Hi everyone, I'm Miss Bailey with the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Los Angeles, and today you're in our virtual STEM laboratory. Yesterday was Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, everyone. But to me, Earth Day is every day, and we're going to do another Earth Day themed activity today, another Earth Day themed experiment. Today's experiment is we're going to figure out and we're going to see what an oil spill is. Have you heard of that word before? Oil spill? Maybe you've heard about it in the news or maybe you've read about it before. Take a minute to guess what you think an oil spill is. An oil spill is when oil accidentally spills into the ocean. And this can happen from a couple of different ways. It could happen from boats that are carrying the oil. It could happen from the drilling of oil in the deep ocean. It could also come from the pipelines that are in the deep ocean, sending us the oil to land. And we use oil, not just cooking oil, but we use oil to power our homes, to power our cars, to power the factories. So we need oil, but sometimes accidents happen and it accidentally spills out into the ocean. Now, before we get into our experiment today, do you think that's a good thing that oil spills into the ocean? Do you think it has an effect on the animals that live in the ocean or maybe the animals that live by the beach? Would you want to live in a place that's really oily and sticky? I wouldn't. Okay, so for today's experiment, you'll need quite a few things, but you should be able to find everything at home, and aside from the oil and water, you can pretty much use anything you need. So you'll need water, you'll need some cooking oil, you'll need a little bit of dish soap. I have it here in this little dish. I have food dye today. If you don't have food dye, that's totally okay. And then you'll need absorbent materials. Now those are things that suck up things like a sponge, things like paper towels, maybe some laundry lint from your dryer, maybe some cotton balls, maybe Q-tips with a little cotton on the end. Anything you think that would wipe up a mess, you can use those absorbent materials with your parents' permission, of course. So with today's experiment, like I said, I'm using food dye, and depending on what kind of food dye you have, you're gonna dye either the water or the oil. So you're gonna have to do a little pre-test. I did that today. What I did was I dipped or I poured a little bit of the food dye in the oil and I stirred it up to see if it would mix, and it didn't mix. So I dumped that little bit of oil out. And so I'm gonna instead dye my water. So you should always do a little pre-test to make sure you're dyeing the right thing. Because if your food dye is based on water, then it'll mix with the water. But if your food dye is based in oil, then it will mix with the oil. And I picked blue today to make it look like the ocean. But you can use any color that you have. Okay, that's really gonna mix. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna very carefully pour in our cooking oil. I have canola oil today, but whatever oil you have at home is fine. And make sure you're asking your parents' permission before you're using all their cooking oil. Awesome. Okay. So before you do anything, I want you to look at your bowl of water and see what's happening. Where is the oil? Is it on the top? Is it on the bottom? Is it collecting together? Is it separating into little blobs? My oil was little bubbles at first, and then it all came together. And you should always observe or watch your experiment as you're going along. Okay, now before we get really into our experiment, you should also grab your paper and your pencil and make a little chart. I wrote oil spill, and then I also wrote down cleaner and the result. You can write down something along those lines, maybe item and result. But essentially what you want to do with this chart is make sure that you're keeping track of the results of your experiment. So one by one, you're going to pick up your object, write down what your object is, and then you're going to do the experiment like we'll do together, and then you write down the results. So I'm going to start off with a feather that I found here at the clubhouse. Maybe you can find a feather outside from a bird, or sometimes couch cushions, or maybe sometimes pillows have feathers in them. So with each object that we're going to use, we're going to dip it in the water, and we're going to try our hardest to scoop up as much oil as possible. And this feather is not doing a good job at all of picking up the oil, it's just spreading it around. And in fact, this feather went from being super big and fluffy to being super slick and gloopy and not cool at all. So if there were birds that were living near the ocean or on the ocean and they were in an oil spill area, then all of their feathers would be clumped up like this. Do you think that would have an effect on the birds? Do you think the birds would be able to fly with feathers that look like this, like all goopy? I don't think so. So we'll move on. We'll put these feathers away. And for feather, I'll put, as a result, nothing. It didn't do anything. Okay. Now I have some shredded paper napkins. I just put them in little strips to make it easier for me to work with, but you can keep your paper napkins in big globs too. And I'm gonna, as best I can, try to scoop up the oil with these paper napkins. And so I'm kind of doing like a little scoopy motion as best I can. These napkins are coming out super greasy. Maybe I'll use a big one too, see how that works. See that go underneath maybe, and then scoop. Oh, I got some oil. And some of it's spilling out. Ugh, science is always a little messy. Okay. So the paper napkins did an okay job. It's always good to like look on the side because then you really see the layer of oil that's still on your water. So I used a napkin, so I'm gonna write down napkin. And I'll put clean some. Okay, now I'm going to use a sponge. This was an old sponge that I used to wash my dishes, but I was going to throw it away. So I'm going to repurpose it for this experiment. If you have a sponge that you're about to throw away, then I suggest saving it for this experiment, or maybe just waiting to do this experiment until you have a sponge ready to go. So I'm going to use this sponge and skim across, try to grab as much oil with this sponge as possible, and it's actually doing a pretty good job. It's covered in oil. And maybe your sponge is more of a paler color like mine. If it is, then you'll be able to see that it also soaked up some water because the sponge is now bluey green, like the color of our water. Ooh. Make sure you have extra napkins to wipe your hands with too. Oil is not the best feeling on your hands. Okay, so we have our sponge, and it's soaked up quite a bit. So I'm going to write exactly that down. And this graph, scientist, is just for your record. It's to keep track of all the different things that you're using. I only have a few today, but maybe if you wait for this experiment for a few days, maybe you can collect like a big pile of things, and you'll have so many items and so many cleaners that you won't be able to keep track of them all. So always writing it down is a good idea. All right. Now I have these cotton balls. I found them. You can go ahead and use cotton balls if you have them, or Q-tips, or anything that would suck or wipe up a mess. And these cotton balls are like meh. They are half filled with oil, half filled with water. You can tell what part's the oil because it's always a little more yellow or green. And the oil, or the water is always a blue. So this one picked up a little bit of water and a little bit of oil. So I wrote down that it picked up both oil and water because that's what happened. All right, last but certainly not least, this is lint that I got from my dryer. If you help your parents or your guardians, or whoever helps take care of you, do the laundry, you'll probably notice that they clean out the dryer when they use it. So this is all little micro stuff from your clothes. And so we're gonna take off a piece. And usually you just throw this away. We're gonna take a piece and put it in the water, doing some more scoop actions. And you know what? It's actually doing a pretty good job. A lot of it's covered in oil. And it's doing a good job of not taking up the water, just the oil, which is pretty cool. Okay, maybe you want to do another one of that because I have so much lint. Do some scoops. Very cool. And like I said, scientists, you can use whatever you have in your house that you would use to wipe up a mess. That's most likely something that's absorbent, and so that would most likely suck up oil. Okay, now we're gonna save the dish soap for absolutely last, and you'll see why. So I have a little bit of dish soap here, and you may even notice that some dish soap companies have commercials of them using their soap to clean animals after oil spills. And you'll see why here. So I'm gonna take a little bit of the dish soap and I'm gonna put it in. And as you drizzle it around your ocean, you'll see that your oil blobs get a lot smaller. And in fact, I'm gonna help it out here. And maybe you even wanna mix it around with your finger or with a spoon. And you'll see that your oil gets smaller or rises to the top. And so you could use maybe another one of your absorbent materials, like maybe the lint, and scoop it up, and they can do a tag team work of absorbing the oil. So if you look on the side, you'll see that our oil layer is completely gone once we use the dish soap. So did the oil disappear? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we picked up quite a bit of the oil with our other absorbent materials. And maybe the dish soap is doing something else. So in real oil spills, companies actually do use things that are very similar to dish soap to help clean up oil spills. And what dish soap does, and what dish soap does when you wash your dishes in your kitchen sink, is it covers the oil and it breaks the oil apart into tiny, tiny little particles. Usually oil likes to stick together, just like water likes to stick together, like we learned last week in our experiment. But the dish soap breaks those oil molecules apart and surrounds them in soap so that they can be rinsed away with water. And in the ocean, there's these really big currents or movements of water. So when the oil gets broken up into these tiny particles, they kind of get dispersed away. So they almost disappear, but not quite. So it looks pretty cool with all the oil on top too. Alrighty, boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed today's experiment. I hope you have a great Earth Day and a great Earth Week. I'll see you guys next time.